Thank you, Paul. So it's Q&A time. Could somebody,
Can you ask, is it possible to ask the Berkshires and the Cape if they've got any questions?
oh, I'm sorry, we forgot to do that for your talk, Barbara. We sort of ran out of time. That's partly why that happened. The Berkshires and the Cape. Do you have any questions for our panelists?
Hey, Tom from the Berkshires.
Yep.
Past village programs resist the tendency to become age general, living as a group apart from other generations and community groups.
Would you repeat that slowly, Ed?
Okay, hold on a second. What are you going to read it?
You're overwhelming us here.
How do villages' programs resist the tendency to become age ghettos, living as a group apart from other generations and community groups?
So the question is, how do villages avoid becoming age ghettos? Correct?
Yes.
I guess, Laura, you have...
Why don't I can start that conversation. So that's a really good question. Beacon Hill Village is not an intergenerational village. There are a number of intergenerational villages that have recognized that it is better for their community to do that. When our founders first started contemplating that, there was a fear that if you became intergenerational, you would lose the focus on aging, and it would become more about the kids or the children. Over time, I think we recognize the value of doing things intergenerationally. I don't think Beacon Hill Village will itself become an intergenerational village, but the thing about a village, and one of the things our founders wanted, was that they wanted to stay in their communities where there are generations. So, in fact, aging in community is anti-village ghetto because you're growing and aging with people of all ages around you. Make sense?
Right. You want to make a remark?
Yeah, I just want to comment on this point. I should say that with the work that we're doing, our starting point on livability issues is some of the concerns of older people, but we then kind of extend our concerns in ways that kind of really serve people of all ages. To the extent that our work on sidewalks, for example, is much appreciated by parents who are with young children who are pushing strollers. That good sidewalk conditions are as important for them as they are for older people. We're now doing work on pedestrian-friendly street lighting. Well, that serves the interest of people of all ages who are walking the streets at night. So we are, in a sense, reaching out, drawing in people of all ages through the initiatives that we pursue.
Right, don't go away. There's a very important question here, which came up because of the earlier discussion. The question is, the first speakers this morning spoke about councils on agings and generated that this morning spoke about council on ages feeling threatened by villages. Brookline Council on Aging is a direct partner of Brookline CAN. Can you, Frank, speak to how well this works and how and why villages should be actively trying to partner with COAs?
Yes, as I indicated this morning, we started out as a collaboration. First of all, I should say that in Massachusetts, compared to the country as a whole, we have a lot of emphasis on councils on aging. Every municipality has one, and some communities are fortunate to have kind of very, very strong ones. And it kind of really made sense for us from the outset to build on what our Council on Aging offered, to make the strong services that it offered known to people who were not familiar to it, to make it comfortable for people who were reluctant to make use of services of a senior center to come to make use of it. And we also found that it was useful for us to do some things politically that the Council on Aging couldn't do. I mean, we're able to, Council on Aging is part of town government, and as part of town government has to be played by the rules. But as citizens, we're free to be political actors, and we're able to advocate for some things that the Council on Aging cannot do. So I should say that it's a highly complementary relationship, and it's something that I would encourage other communities to pursue as well.
I'll just make one remark along those lines. Because of the work I've been doing, I view the Councils on Aging and the AAAs as an enormous asset base to draw on. And if you go back to when they were founded in the Johnson administration, where Medicare and Medicaid were put into place, that's partly they were put into place. Organizations are going to vary depending on the people, the resources in the community, and the individual personalities involved. But if it's not working in your town, get involved. And villages, I guess, are an opportunity organizationally to get involved and begin to drive that, although there's often negative reactions to that. I know one instance where there's a feeling, oh, that village, that's a bunch of elitist folks. But, I'm old enough that I run across all kinds of things like that. Jerry, you want to make a comment?
This again is the relationship with the Council on Aging in Lexington. We have a town department called Department of Human Services, and they are responsible for things like senior affairs, senior activities, and they sort of are the group that the Council on Aging reports into. And they work closely together. We work closely with them. I mentioned that we had recently talked to some people from Human Services and Transportation. They were having trouble getting information about Lyft and Uber, and we stepped up because we happened to have somebody who knew about, had worked out a little training module on that. Another case, we've moved into a new community center a couple of years ago, and one of our members of Lexington Home said, we're short of the number of mandated handicap parking spaces. And we said, go for it. And a group from our group from Lexington Home started digging, and it took a while to convince the various departments in town that indeed we did need a couple more handicap parking spaces. And it took a while, but we finally got them. And that was one where the Council on Aging stood by the sidelines and applauded what we were doing. So again, as Tom said, it's going to vary according to your community and how you organize, but you can develop a very, very symbiotic relationship with your Council on Aging and let them view you as a resource.
Your comment about the handicap parking, we had an issue in Reading where we have actually a member of our organization who is almost a quadriplegic, and so the question of van accommodating handicap parking came up, and Reading Neighbors Network put together a little committee, did the work for the town, put it out, and things are happening. Can you hear me down on the Cape?
We can, Tom. We had a question about the Beacon Hill budget, annual budget.
Before we go to that, I was wondering if Maddie Noonan would have any comments, because Maddie, I believe you're on the Council on Aging in Barnstable, are you not?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Do you have any comment? Do you have any comment you'd like to make? I'm not sure how it will come through, but you want to give it a shot if you have one. Don't feel pressured to do that, though.
No, I never feel the pressure. I'm happy to share my thoughts. What I can say is, in listening to what the gentleman from Brookline said, I completely echo what he said. He stated pretty much what I've said from the get-go with this is that what village, associations try to do is strengthen our response to an aging community and ensure that we're increasing the safety net, that we're working together. Somebody said earlier, we're better together. And I think for us, there is a limit in some communities, such as Barnstable, like where we are a large community geographically and also with our, population, that we can't do everything as a municipality. There are limitations to the services that we can provide. And so these partnerships, I think, are vital and necessary as we're seeing our communities aging, to make sure there is that ability for us to respond as a community on a neighborhood level. And the point about where, as councils on aging in Massachusetts particularly, we are government entities. So as that, we do have to play by the rules. And, the power of a village association is that advocacy piece, I think, is really critical.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments on that? Interesting question here. I believe what makes communities vibrant is diversity, race, socioeconomic, and age. What are your organizations doing to be more inclusive? Who would like to take that?
Well, I want to say a couple of things in that respect. First of all, the way we're structured with our nominal membership fee, we're kind of really set up to be affordable for everyone. We, in addition to that, we've had some explicit outreach efforts to reach seniors who live in public housing. Brookline is fortunate to have about 500 senior housing units, and there is a kind of a little bit the sense that the seniors who live in public housing are kind of less involved than people generally, and we thought it would be useful to reach out to them, and with some grant support through Jewish Family and Children's Services, we did a special project where we hired a community organizer, and we got some residents from senior housing who participated in a kind of a scan of the pedestrian environment near their buildings. And that turned out to be a way, kind of in the first instance, to draw them into our organization, to teach them how to be politically effective in town. Then it also was a way of getting some significant sidewalk improvements, Tom. Our municipality was kind of really impressed when some of the residents of senior housing came to meet with town administrators to express their concerns about sidewalk conditions. So, that's a specific initiative that turned out to be very successful.
Thank you, Frank. I have a question for Paula. CCRCs are often viewed as, a really great business, but it's a struggle. Maybe not as bad as a restaurant business, but it's a struggle. And yet, as I commented earlier, I see the AAA ASAPs in Massachusetts and the councils on aging as enormous resources. The CCRCs potentially are an enormous set of resources too, and there would be an overlapping of the business models, and you alluded to some of it. But I guess I wanted to just ask, with the experience that Carlton Willard has with operating a village in the context of at home, are there any ongoing collaborations, discussions, and so forth with other CCRCs relative to developing relationships with local village organizations to do the leveraging of their services, which are costing them the money, and that would not only help them, but also be supportive of the members of those organizations?
I think the short answer is yes, there are. The big thing in CCRC world is home and community-based services. That's the buzzword. That's what everybody's talking about because, as you indicated, Tom, CCRCs are not necessarily doing so well now, particularly the skilled nursing end of it, because we're doing such a great job of keeping everybody at home. There are less and less looking at the kind of model that we have. There are a couple down in the South, and I certainly get a number of calls. It is more that established villages like Monadnock at Home and some of the others have come to me and said, how can we affiliate with a CCRC? What can we do? What can we go to them and say, what can we offer them, rather than kind of the other way around? But I think there is a real opportunity for villages to look at the CCRCs or the assisted livings or even the skilled nursings in their area. It doesn't have to be the continuum, and say, here are ways that we can help you, because I think they are now going to be much more receptive to that conversation because they are all struggling to fill their beds. So yes, there are some going on. They are looking at ways. It certainly is a discussion that goes on at the national level for Leading Age, which is the national not-for-profit group for continuing care retirement communities in the retirement world. But I think there are certainly opportunities out there that are not being explored yet.
That raises some interesting questions, which the years that I've been working in this field, a lot of good people are working very hard, but naturally they have a lot on their plate. And it's the old issue of chimneys, verticals, whatever you want. And that's why what we're trying to do in our little group with CNAP Alliance is get to people to get together and talk to each other, because it takes a village in all kinds of different things. Laura, as the organization that launched the village model in 2002, 2001, what do you see as your key challenges today re sustainability after 17 years, and particularly in terms of the principal goals of villages?
It's funny, as I actually wrote down what those challenges were, because we think about this every day. So sustainability for us is a two-part component. You've got the financial resources, and then you've got the human capital. And we really are organizations that are driven and succeed and thrive on human capital. Both Brookline Can and Lexington at Home, and probably every village here, is experiencing, I don't want to call it a crisis in volunteerism, but for people being willing to step up and take on the work of the village. So it's something that at Beacon Hill Village we've been focused on most especially over the last 9 months. And one of the ways we're going to address that is to think about our marketing. It's always hard to communicate what a village is, right? That elevator speech it has been painful for all of us to develop. But if we can find a way to not shy away from the word aging, because that's what we are, but make aging not a bad thing, and be able to reach out to people who are nearing retirement or are recently retired, and figure out what is it that what might be the hook for them to join a village. We think that will bring in the new leadership potential. So when we think about our own board and bench strength, it is something we struggle with all the time, finding people to work on the committees and do the work of the village. Even though we're a paid staff model, only 40% of our budget is covered by dues. Being in downtown Boston, you can imagine our number one biggest line item after staff is rent. And then we have a huge bill for our annual budget, because we are over $500,000 in total income and expenses. So we have to find new ways also to reach out in terms of finding funding. And at the same time, the institutional philanthropic environment is collapsing. And fewer entities are focusing on supporting aging. It was one of the reasons why the Village to Village Network ended up becoming an independent organization, was because National Capital Impact Partners had a big grant from the Metropolitan Life Foundation, and that supported the village-to-village network in the first 3 years. MetLife decided they weren't going to support aging anymore, and so they withhold. So we have two sources of income. We have to find new ways of attracting people who have the energy and perhaps the vision, and encourage them to join us and co-create that village of the future for them. And one way to do that may be to relook at our membership structure. So one of the things that I would like to leave anyone who's thinking about starting a village is think about those membership structures. We have two types of memberships, individual and household at the regular level and a low income model. There are other villages when they get started, if they start with a social membership, they might be able to attract different folks. I'd love to see something that encourages newly retired people to join without feeling like they're kind of all in and no one wants to admit that they need help. So that's kind of my thought.
We're about out of time, but before we go, Berkshire Community College, Howard, you're going to talk about a hub and spoke model out in the Lenox area. Do you have any questions for the panelists here relative to the hub and spoke model that you'd like to raise?
Not at this time.
Okay, that's fine. I have a question here for Gary. With your structuring around chapters, how do you promote and drive socialization across the full organization and avoid a certain type of ghettoization?
That's a good question. One of the things about the chapters is that you build a strong affinity group within each chapter. Lexington being the type of community it is, it's not unusual for a lot of the people in one chapter to know a lot of the people in another chapter. We're a suburban community in the 30,000 range. The people we tend to attract to Lexington Home to a large extent are people who have been active in various things in the town. Town government is a hobby for an awful lot of the people. Our town meetings go for weeks on end. We do it, as I said, we encourage inter-chapter activities, interest groups that do function. And at our annual meeting, and this past year we had a 10th anniversary celebration event. We try very hard to encourage people at these events to mingle with other people from other chapters. But unfortunately, in some cases, human instincts take over and people just tend to congregate with the people they know best. But that's one thing that we are trying to focus on most of the time. One of the other things to echo what was just said about bringing in new people, I mentioned that we had written this article in our newsletter last year, and it was slanted toward people either newly retired or approaching retirement. And the title of the article was, "For 10 years, Lexington Home has built a thriving community." But the subtitle was, "Friendships, Activities, and Service to Enrich Your Retirement." So I don't know how much of a hook that was on some of the new people. They raised their hands and said they were interested in joining, but it was there. So again, we are sensitized to this. I'm trained as a chem engineer, so you got to keep the pipeline full. You got people flowing out of the pipeline, moving away, or unfortunately dying, or whatever. You got to keep bringing new people into the pipeline for sustainability.
Thank you, Gary. So we're at the lunch hour, and we're going to start up at 1:45, and that will shift the focus to Berkshire Community College, and Howard Shapiro will be the speaker there. So again, thanks for bearing with us as we work out these technical difficulties. I'll just remark that 3 months ago, none of us had even seen this equipment. So I think we feel pretty good about where we're at, but we've got a ways to go. Thank you very much.